You are listening to Social Europe podcast. We discuss cutting-edge thinking on politics, economy, and employment and labour with some of the most thought-provoking people around, including Nobel Prize winners and other internationally acclaimed experts. So welcome and enjoy the conversation.
Welcome everyone to the latest Social Europe podcast. My name is Robin Wilson, Editor-in-Chief of Social Europe. My guest today is Professor Pasi Sahlberg, who has for decades been closely observing Finland's evolving education system and explaining its wider relevance in his book, Finnish Lessons: What Can the World Learn from Educational Change in Finland? The third edition appeared recently, as has, with Timothy Walker, In Teachers We Trust, the Finnish Way to World-Class Schools. Many thanks, Pasi, for giving generously of your time.
Thank you, Robin. Good to be with you.
Over recent decades, there has been a wave of education reforms across the developed world. In line with the wider notion of new public management, this has focused on levering up educational performance through monitoring more closely what teachers teach, making schools more accountable by externally moderated tests, and offering parents more choice of the school their children attend. You would say these reforms are quite wrong-headed. Why?
Yeah, well, about 20 years ago, there was a growing belief among education reformers around the world, really, that education systems should be run like businesses or marketplace. If education could only act more like a marketplace, somehow excellence would prevail. That's how people thought. At that time, there were some social laboratories, I call them social laboratories, globally, like England and Sweden and Chile earlier, and many parts of the United States and some parts here in Australia, where these new policies, these new ideas and theories of change were experimented. And now the OECD's piece, whatever you think about, and I know that people have different opinions and views about the goods and bads of the PISA study, but what the PISA did 20 years ago in the year 2000 was to put all these education systems to the test in terms of how successfully they are educating their students, including these social laboratories. And now the evidence, going to your question, Robin, the evidence from the OECD's education systems, and not only the OECD data, but the much of the research that has been done on these social experiments around the world, and many regular education systems have been pretty clear. The business-like, the things that we have learned during the last 20 years is that the business-like between school competition creates more losers than winners. This has been one of the lessons here, for example, in this part of the world. We have learned that standardized one-size-fits-all teaching does not improve student learning. We have learned that test-based accountability is not linked to better learning outcomes. This is what the OECD itself concluded last year based on its own data. And we have learned that the digitalization, the educational technology does not uplift quality and equity of education systems. So all these policies that you mentioned, Robin, are what Michael Full and some others have called so-called wrong drivers in education reforms. And I think it's not only my opinion, but whatever way you look at the research evidence, the conclusion is that it has been indeed a wrong way, a wrong direction to try to improve education systems.
Okay, well, if that's the evidence, then let's look at the key elements of the Finnish model, which has emerged since the comprehensive education reform of the 1970s, and which offers a radically different approach to enhancing performance, treating education not as a matter of winners and losers, as you said, but as a public good. And let's start with what for you is at the heart of it, the teacher. In Finland, you stress teaching is a high status profession with entry requiring a research-based master's qualification. National curricular frameworks are broad brush. There is not a system of rigorous inspection. Teachers don't have excessive class time, and they collaborate with each other in problem solving. So why is, as you put it, trusting the teachers so important in your view?
Yeah. First of all, I think it's important to make one notion that this academic teacher education that you mentioned in your question has been the only pathway into teaching in Finland since the really early 1980s. Unlike in many other countries, there are different ways to become a teacher, but in Finland that has been the only way, and it's a critically important element of this trust-based system. So today, as you said, all teachers they hold master's degrees, including the preschool and primary school teachers. That allows them to not only teach better, but also plan what they teach in a school in a different ways, and also evaluate and assess students' outcomes. So that's why Finland doesn't really need to spend that much attention and money to external national assessments, because much of the assessment is done by teachers. And these planning and teaching and assessing, these are the critically important professional elements of what teachers do. So now when in Finland, when the teachers are prepared to understand and manage and continuously improve these three core elements, the system can trust them in all these aspects of schooling. And by the way, all the parents can trust their own children to the hands of these highly trained and qualified teachers. So trust is an important part of this, what we call a social capital, that in turn will help people to do better what they are supposed to do. We all know this from raising our own children. Anybody who has been a parent knows that when you trust your own kids to do the right thing and behave well, that they normally do it better than if you control them all the time and deny things from them. So when my conclusion here is that when we trust our teachers not just to do what they are told to do, and this is what happens in many countries, but that they are able to allow to figure out the best ways to teach and run their schools, then these miracles happen. And that's why this trust in teachers in Finland has created a kind of a self-improving human development system that is complex and it's living and it's organic, unlike in many other places where the system is much more mechanic and deterministic in a sense. But that kind of an organic system and self-improving culture can only be created when there's enough trust in teachers and schools and the system.
Okay, now let's turn to the child's perspective. Early years education has been developing in recent years in Finland, but formal schooling only starts when children are 7. The primary and lower secondary system has now been unified. Every child is presumed to have talent, and most children benefit from special education at some point. Children are not streamed, nor do they undergo externally moderated standardized tests until they leave compulsory education, now continuing to age 18. Why is this a better route to good outcomes for all children and overall performance than more competition and preparation for frequent standardized tests?
Yeah, Robin, as you said, that the Finnish education system is to a large extent really designed from the children's perspective, just like you said. It assumes in a way that all children are different. They have different talents and different interests, and they have different living circumstances, and they also have different ways of learning. And that the Finnish system assumes that children can be talented and successful in schools in many different ways, not just academically. Again, that is a very common way in many other countries, that you are good in school if you are good in literacy and numeracy, but you are not necessarily good in school if you are talented in some other things. So that's why the standardized assessments, by the design, how they are designed, have much narrower conception of intelligence than the holistic teacher-led assessments of students. That is a common practice in all Finnish schools. As I said, that we don't have a national standardized assessments in Finland, so the students are always assessed by their teachers, and teachers, obviously, they look at the children in a broader way and more holistic way than just the standardized assessments. So again, going back to this winners and losers notion that we both said earlier, that the standardized test will always produce winners and losers. If the tests only produce winners, they're not good tests, and if they only fail all the students, they're bad tests either. So that's a kind of a nature of employing standardized tests, and that's why assessing students in terms of their own potential and talents is most likely to help most of the students to realize their talents, and this is exactly what the Finnish system is trying to do.
Yes, and of course the the Latin derivation of education is educare, to draw out, and the implication of what you're saying is this is about drawing out the individual potential which every child in their own different way has. Okay,
that's right.
And then there is the school. In Sweden, which you mentioned earlier, Pasi, for years the drift has been towards this idea of parental choice. But in Finland, the expectation is simply that the child will go to the local school, which will be as good as any other school, and indeed will provide a range of pastoral and other services in addition to the strictly educational ones. What then makes school principals and their teaching staffs strive to improve, and how do they do it?
Yes, this notion actually that the best school for all the children should be their neighborhood school is, it was initially the Finnish idea, that and many people kind of didn't believe that the Finnish system is operating like this. Interesting thing is that the OECD, for example, now when they're using the global evidence from different education systems, has concluded exactly the same thing, that the successful education systems are designed in a way that the neighborhood school is the good enough school for each and every child. But in Finland, when we look at the principals and teachers, they are not only interested in doing their best in their own schools, but also that they are also concerned about how they can support and help other schools around them. And there are a lot of studies and reviews showing that this is a fairly unique way of, being a teacher or leading a school. And that's why in Finland, the school leadership has a strong collective dimension, where the principals share their time and often resources as well by helping their colleagues and neighboring schools. Again, something that is difficult to find in most other education systems, where the principals and teachers are mostly occupied by making sure that their own school is successful, and when there is this competitive culture, their interest is to be better than their neighboring school. So this is another positive side of the absence of this corporate like toxic competition between the schools that we mentioned earlier. So my experience is that the Finnish principals and teachers have a sort of a sense of belonging to the community and the nation building. They feel that together with their colleagues in their communities and broader in the system, that they can make their own communities and the whole nation better, and that way they can change the world, what they have been kind of a promise to do when they chose this profession in the first place.
Finally, Pasi, an important part of high educational performance in Finland is the system of education as a whole. And you said earlier that there's no need for an expensive system of inspection. And more generally, the system seems lean and simple without many layers of administration or bureaucracy. In your book, you call this systems excellence that boosts education for all children. So what's the role of this overall system, beyond the teacher, beyond the child, beyond the school, beyond the collection of the schools? How does the overall system function to the optimum in Finland?
Yeah, I'm happy that you asked this, Robin, because this question is often absent in these conversations where, for example, foreign observers try to figure out that what is the secret of the Finnish success. And as you said, that I have been writing about this and some others, that it's about the system. It's not so much about individual schools. And I've been hosting and meeting thousands of people who have visited in Finland. That they are often surprised not to find these superhero teachers or the kind of a power pedagogy in the schools that would explain why Finland has been doing fairly well in this international comparison. So I tell them that the secret, if there is any, is this systemness. We call it the systemness of Finnish education. That some other countries as well, like this, you hear the similar story in Singapore and some of the Canadian provinces as well, that it's a system that makes education outcomes flourish, not necessarily the individual teachers or the schools. And as I said earlier, all schools and their staff feel that they are part of the same human system. And it's a very important thing. It's easy to say this, but it's much harder to really understand what it means, because these collective efforts to continuously improve the system is an important aim of the Finnish school and educational leadership. And I think that I cannot emphasize enough the importance of understanding the systems nature of the Finnish school system vis-a-vis the individual schools and teachers. And many people really get the whole story wrong, or they get it story incomplete without really asking this question that you beautifully phrased earlier.
And if one of your foreign visitors, Pasi, was to ask you what are the key features of the system that give it this positive systemness, what would you tell them?
I think it's pretty much what I said earlier. That in Finland education is perceived as a public good. To be a teacher or principal is a part of the public service, and the purpose of education is to, of course, to provide each and every child a good and adequate education, but also enhance the entire system. And I think you can only do this if you truly believe and you also behave in a spirit of collaboration and collective action for improving the people and people's lives through education. And that's why I emphasize so much this lack of between school competition and this market type of ideology in the Finnish system, because it's really seen as a public good, and collaboration rather than competition is such an important part of the Finnish way. And the other thing is that the Finnish system is one of those few systems that is basically 100% public system, that there are no private schools, and the school choice for parents is kept to the minimum by the education policymakers and decision makers, because they are held accountable for making sure that the system in all of its parts and every single school is good enough school for each and everyone. Unlike in many other places, like here, for example, where the authorities and policymakers say that if you're not happy with your local school, go shop around and try to find something better. So those are some of these important elements of the Finnish system.
Yes, I should explain to our Listeners, of course, that Pasi is currently in Australia rather than in Finland. Mm-hmm. You mentioned earlier, Pasi, the PISA league tables of educational performance. And in Finnish lessons, you're careful to stress the limits of these, which you don't believe capture the holistic endeavour, as you put it earlier, that is education in Finland. But you do discuss in the most recent version of Finnish lessons the slippage by Finland in recent PISA assessments and relatedly widening inequalities, in turn relating those to inequalities in Finnish society. And you suggest the Finnish model needs further renewal to match the needs and aspirations of young people in the 2020s. So what finally are the key shifts in focus you would want to see?
Yeah, first of all, I must say that this is nothing new, that my colleagues and policymakers in Finland, they are very well aware of these facts, that the Finnish system has been not doing as well as it used to do. But at the same time, we need to remember that most of the OECD systems have experienced the same, that the educational performance globally has been declining. So it is a serious Finnish thing that has happened, but it has happened in the same way in many other places. But I think that what my colleagues and I fully agree with this. What we are trying to emphasize is to have even kind of a stronger focus on enhancing student voice and children's right in education. This is very, very typical Nordic approach to not just to listen to what students think and what they have in mind, but also engage them in designing and planning what goes on in the school. I think in Finland we also need to focus more on making teacher collaboration in each and every school a part of the culture. As I said earlier, the collaboration has been and is a strong part of the Finnish education culture, but I think we can do much better in this in-school teacher collaboration, so that we can get more out of this human capital and resources that we have in every school. I think we also need to understand in Finland, particularly in Finland, but in all the other countries also, that the young people live very different lives today than they did 10 or 20 years ago. And this has an effect on how they live and how they learn in school. I think that not every school and not all the aspects of the schools have been taking this into consideration well enough. And then finally, I think that the Finland needs to continue smart and intelligent investments in fairness and inclusion and equity of our education system. This is nothing new. Finland has been doing this before, but I think that we just need to find more effective ways how to make sure that we can turn around this inconvenient trend of increasing inequalities in the system and make sure that each and every school is a good enough school for all children.
Thank you very much, Pasi. You've been listening to Pasi Sahlberg, author of Finnish Lessons, which is published by Teachers College Press, and co-author of In Teachers We Trust, which is published by Norton. Thank you and goodbye.
Thank you very much for listening. We hope you enjoyed it. Make sure you don't miss future episodes by subscribing to Social Europe Podcast. You can also read our articles on www.socialeurope.eu and follow us on Facebook and on Twitter @Social Europe. Until next time.